The air in the House Oversight Committee hearing room was thick with the stale scent of recycled air and the heavier weight of collective boredom. The session on presidential overreach had already dragged on for an hour past its scheduled end. A monotonous drone of procedural jargon and recycled talking points. Most viewers, if they hadn't already switched off, were scrolling through their phones, half listening to the background noise of democracy at work. Then, a shift. Subtle at first, like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a figure usually known for her incisive, often fiery, cross-examinations, leaned forward. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic. She removed her glasses, placing them precisely on the table before her, and then, in a voice that didn't rise but somehow lowered, she asked for silence. Not from the room, which was already quiet save for the hum of microphones, but from the noise of tradition, from the unspoken rules that govern political theater. Her tone, a soft, resonant hum, somehow made everything else louder. I want to shift this discussion to something that speaks directly to character, she began, her gaze sweeping across the panel, locking onto each member with an intensity that suggested she already knew the fire she was about to light. A few committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Chairperson Ruben Geller, usually unflappable, looked visibly tense, his jaw tight. Crockett wasn't on script anymore, not the agreed-upon one, anyway. This country has spent years protecting power over truth, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet, steel-like resolve. And that stops today. A few scoffs rippled through the gallery, a couple of eyebrows rose in disbelief, but she kept going, methodical, measured. There's a set of sealed documents originating from an Arizona court in 2019. Documents protected under legal maneuvering and, more importantly, buried by political influence. The murmurs died down. Those files involved then-President Trump, a former staffer, and a child. Now, silence truly hit the room, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on every ear. I have a sworn affidavit from a federal contractor, Crockett stated, her voice cutting through the sudden void. She handled digital shredding of files flagged under the White House Correspondence Protection Act. One file was different. It referenced a payment of $3.1 million to a woman under the alias TB. She paused, a dramatic beat that stretched the tension to breaking point, then flipped to a photocopy she held in her hand. The camera zoomed in, a grainy but unmistakable phrase filling the screen: paternity agreement enforced under non-disclosure. DNA confirmation pending. Representative Matt Overby, visibly agitated, tried to interrupt, "Is this really the time?" but Crockett didn't blink. Her eyes, now unshielded by glasses, held an unwavering conviction. The people didn't vote for secrecy, Mr. Overby. They voted for representation. If the president knew during his first term that Baron Trump was not biologically his and buried that information to protect his image, we have a problem. That's not just legal. It's moral. In that instant, it wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was national combustion. CNN cut to it live, MSNBC followed, even Fox News, against all expectations, didn't switch away. Phones in pockets across the country lit up like warning lights, vibrating with push alerts. TikTok clips spread within minutes, each one captioned with the same stunned, incredulous sentence: "Did Jasmine just say Barron isn't Trump's son?" Back inside the chamber, murmurs turned into chaos. Overby slammed his pen down, motioning frantically to adjourn. For the first time, Crockett raised her voice, cutting through the din like a laser. "We will not silence the truth because it makes the powerful uncomfortable. We are not talking about gossip, we are talking about justice manipulated for personal protection." Representative Eleanor Vance, her face a mask of repulsion, tried to pivot, muttering, "Let's keep the child out of this." Crockett cut back, sharp and unforgiving. "You want to protect a child? Then stop using him as a prop for power." The room exploded. Microphones went hot with the cacophony of shouting voices. The House feed, the official broadcast, cut unexpectedly. For over 3 minutes. People watching at home thought it was a technical glitch, a momentary blip, until someone leaked the raw feed online. Trump's name was censored twice. The file Jasmine referenced was flagged under Homeland Security review. Hours later. But the damage had already spread, an unstoppable wildfire of speculation and outrage. That evening, network ratings broke records. Newsrooms scrambled to verify the identity behind TB. Crockett, meanwhile, didn't retreat. When asked by a journalist in the hallway whether she feared backlash, her answer was as cold as it was clear: no. Because I didn't say anything I can't back up. The hearing resumed 22 minutes later, but nothing meaningful continued. The room wasn't debating anymore, it was scrambling. Some staffers wouldn't make eye contact with her, others simply left the building, but what no one saw, not on C-SPAN or in the headlines, was that Crockett had gotten a text on her private phone just as she walked back into her office. One word. Finally. The air in the West Wing, usually a tightly controlled environment of hushed efficiency, now crackled with a frantic, almost desperate energy. It was barely 9 o'clock, but the atmosphere felt like the dead of night after a catastrophic election. Loss. A junior staffer, her face pale, had just dropped her iced coffee all over a printer, but nobody noticed. All eyes were locked on the muted TV bolted to the corner of the Roosevelt room, where Jasmine Crockett, impossibly calm, was still mid-sentence on the endless replay loops. The silence in the room wasn't just about the broadcast, it was about what they knew might come next. Across the hall, Chief of Staff Brian Halford stood frozen in front of the screen, his gaze unblinking. His mind raced, calculating the political fallout, the media strategy, the sheer impossibility of containing this. The president had just left a trade meeting, walking towards them, half-focused, waving off an aide rambling about agricultural tariffs in Kansas. Then he saw Crockett's face on the screen. "What's this?" Trump asked, motioning toward the TV as he stepped in, his voice a low rumble of annoyance. "Why is this on every channel?" No one responded fast enough. Trump turned to Halford, his eyes narrowing. "Brian, what the hell is going on?" Halford opened his mouth, then closed it again, a deer in headlights. The words caught in his throat. "Sir," he managed, his voice barely a whisper, "she brought up sealed files about Baron Trump." Trump's face froze in that half-open scowl he got when he wasn't sure whether to laugh or throw something. "She what?" The room held its breath. Someone cleared their throat in the corner. Another aide slowly reached for the remote. "Don't touch that." Trump snapped, his voice a sudden, explosive bark. He walked to the TV, eyes narrowing, just as Crockett, on screen, dropped the word paternity. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint, tinny audio from the TV. Then, Trump wheeled around. "Get me the network right now," he barked, his voice rising to a roar. "Put me on the phone with what's his name? Peterson at CNN. Now." An intern sprinted to make the call, fumbling with his phone. Halford stepped forward cautiously, trying to inject a semblance of reason into the escalating chaos. "Sir, we might need to be strategic about how we are strategic." Trump growled, his face contorted in disbelief. "She just said Barron's not my son on live television, and you want strategy." He snatched his phone off the table and called Hope Sinclair, his personal legal counsel, putting her on speaker. "She can't say that. That's slander. I want a statement. We sue her. We sue CNN. We sue everyone." Hope answered, her voice calm, almost unnervingly so, cutting through Trump's fury. "Sir, defamation doesn't hold if it turns out to be true." Trump's silence gave the whole room its answer. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a sudden, chilling void where bluster usually reigned. Halford seized the moment. "We don't know what she has, sir, but we do know this, it's already out. Every outlet's picked it up. Not a son is trending. TikTok's got clips from 4 different angles." Trump's hand was shaking. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He turned the volume back up, just in time to catch Crockett's final statement on the loop. "If the president knew during his first term that Baron Trump was not biologically his and buried that information to protect his image, we have a problem. That's not just legal. It's moral." Trump flung the remote against the wall. It shattered into a dozen pieces, scattering across the polished floor. "This is all because of that stupid agreement," he muttered, the words escaping him like a confession. Halford knew. There was an agreement. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice low, almost human. Trump didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Marjorie Klein, one of his longest-serving advisors. "Get Melania on the phone." "Sir, she's in Europe." "Then wake her up." Klein hesitated, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes. "Do you really want to call your wife?" As Klein stepped out, Trump sat heavily into the leather chair at the end of the conference table, staring at the fragments of the remote on the floor. The West Wing, usually a fortress, was cracking. At a quiet corner of El Sereno, California, 51-year-old Genevieve Larson pulled into her driveway just after 6 a.m., the first hints of dawn painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. She was still wearing the blue scrubs from her overnight nursing shift, the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to her. Her life was meticulously ordered, a carefully constructed piece built over years. She hadn't even turned off the ignition before her neighbor, a woman named Maria, came running up the path, phone in hand, her face a mixture of shock and urgency. "You need to see this," Maria said, breathless, holding out the glowing screen. Genevieve squinted at the phone, her eyes still adjusting to the pre-dawn light. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at, just a grainy clip of Jasmine Crockett sitting straight-backed in a studio, her voice sharp, calm, delivering words that seemed to echo from a distant, impossible past. "A woman under the alias TB." Genevieve's chest tightened, a cold knot forming in her stomach. That alias wasn't random. It was her. Talia Breyer. The name she had used in court, buried under a protective order she had hoped would never, ever resurface. And now, it was national. The quiet life she had painstakingly built, the anonymity she cherished, was shattering in real time, broadcast across every screen in America. Inside her house, Genevieve moved with a chilling efficiency. She locked the door, drew the blinds, and powered on the burner phone she kept hidden inside an old coffee tin under the sink. It hadn't rung in over 4 years, a silent testament to the success of her escape. But this morning, the screen lit up with 4 missed calls. 1 voicemail. The voice she heard was her lawyer, Harris Noland, his tone urgent, strained. "Genevieve, I know you've seen it. Do not answer anything. I'm on the next flight. We knew this day might come. Just sit tight." Her hands trembled as she sat down at the kitchen table, the silence around her suddenly loud, oppressive. Her son was away at college, and for the first time in years, she wished he wasn't, not because she needed protection, but because she didn't want to face this alone. Her mind, unbidden, drifted back to 2005, to a lavish hotel suite in Phoenix where it had all started. She was a surgical tech then, young, ambitious, still believing in second chances. She had met Trump at a benefit dinner through a friend of a friend. He wasn't charming, not really, but he was persuasive, confident. He made you feel like saying no would be the biggest mistake of your life. 8 months later, she had a baby. And a secret that could destroy everything, she told him at first. He brushed her off, a dismissive smirk on his face. "I'm not the guy," he'd said. Then came the lawyers. Then the agreement. He never signed the birth certificate, but he did sign the check and the NDA. Genevieve had used the money to start fresh, new city, new name, new life. It had almost worked. Until Jasmine Crockett said her name without saying her name. By noon, her full name hadn't surfaced in the public, but the vultures were circling. Paparazzi were parked 2 blocks down, their long lenses like predatory eyes. Someone tried to pose as a delivery driver. Another slid a crumpled note under her garage door: "We know who you are. Talk to us first. Name your price." She didn't respond. Not yet. Crockett's team had already reached out, a secure line, no pressure, just a heads up. Reporters were digging. Someone from a DC outlet had already narrowed it down to 5 women, they were all getting calls. Genevieve knew it was only a matter of time. Her lawyer, Harris Noland, landed in Oakland by mid-afternoon and went straight to her home. "They are going to try to break you," he said, sitting across from her at the same kitchen table where she used to pack school lunches. "I know," she said softly, her voice thin. "But you don't owe them anything." She met his eyes, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "But I owe her something." "Crockett." He nodded. Genevieve stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a red folder. Inside, copies of the original court filing, emails from Trump's legal team, proof of the paternity test. Request that he never answered. I don't want to go on TV, she said. I don't want interviews. I just want the truth to be known. Harris stuttered her. Then we do it on your terms. Written statement. Through the Ledger or the Guardian. Somewhere that won't twist it. She nodded. And I want them to know I didn't ask for this. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. By nightfall, Genevieve's name still hadn't broken, but the right people now knew exactly who she was. A Washington Post journalist sent a request for comment at 7:02 p.m. 10 minutes later, a second message came in. We know you're the woman Jasmine was referring to. I'd like to hear your side before someone else writes it for you. Genevieve closed her laptop. Tomorrow she would decide. While the nation fixated on the unfolding drama in Washington and Genevieve Larson braced for the inevitable storm, a different kind of truth was stirring halfway across the country. In a cramped, perpetually coffee-scented newsroom in downtown St. Louis, veteran journalist Conrad Wells stared at his monitor, blinking against the harsh blue light. He wasn't young, wasn't flashy, and definitely wasn't part of the online crowd chasing viral headlines. He was old school, a bloodhound for facts, a man who trusted paper trails more than trending hashtags. When the Crockett story broke, something tugged at him. Not the immediate drama, he'd seen enough of that to last a lifetime. It was the silence between the noise, the parts no one was chasing, the threads that didn't scream for attention but quietly held the fabric together. He leaned back in his squeaky chair, cracked his knuckles, and opened a folder on his desktop labeled NDA Patent 2017. Conrad had covered Trump for years, but not like cable news did. He watched patents, payments, real estate filings, offshore trusts. After Crockett's statement, a faint alarm bell rang in his memory, recalling something odd he'd flagged 5 years ago. Was a wire transfer. Small, almost insignificant, buried deep in a quarterly report from a Trump-linked shell company to an Arizona-based LLC named Red Lantern Diagnostics. No one had cared back then. It was just another obscure transaction in a labyrinth of corporate filings. But now it felt like a whisper in the raw. He typed fast, his fingers flying across the worn keyboard. Red Lantern Diagnostics Arizona Paternity Medical Testing Court Filings 2019. A public court record popped up from Maricopa County. Most of it was sealed, as expected, but the docket showed a motion filed under the initials TB versus JDT. John Donald Trump. There was no ruling attached, just a withdrawal of complaint and a notice of private resolution. Conrad sat up straighter, a jolt of adrenaline hitting him. He called in a favor from an old courthouse clerk, a woman named Brenda who owed him 2 decades of small kindnesses. 30 minutes later, her voice, a low whisper over the line, confirmed his suspicion. There was an affidavit attached, Conrad. Sealed within 3 hours of filing. You're not the first to ask about it today. Who else? He asked, his pen poised. She paused. Lawyers. Private ones. Not press. He wrote that down. By now, Crockett's team had gone quiet, strategic, smart. But that didn't mean he couldn't find the edges, the overlooked corners. He called a contact at a medical courier service based in Tempe, Arizona. They used to work with private labs back in 2019. One of their drivers, he learned, had logged a pickup from an address that matched. Red Lantern Diagnostics. Destination, D.C. Overnight. The sender, Genevieve Larson, there it was. The name. The connection. He didn't publish it. Not yet. But he knew now. Crockett hadn't thrown out a theory, she had a foundation. And possibly the documents to match. He pulled FEC records, checking for legal reimbursements filed under consulting or discretionary services. He found 3 instances, all in mid-2020, tagged under legal risk mitigation. 2 were linked to familiar, high-powered firms. The third, a small Arizona firm called G. Noland & Associates. Genevieve's lawyer. It all fit. At 10:17 p.m., Conrad sat down at his desk, cracked open a lukewarm can of Dr. Pepper, and started writing the first draft of what would become the most read article of his career. He didn't lead with the child. He didn't lead with the money. He led with the silence. In a democracy, secrets rot us from the inside, he typed, his fingers flying. This isn't about scandal. It's about a government machinery built to bury the people it fears. He filed it under embargo, waiting for clearance from legal, but he knew deep down, the dam was cracking. What Crockett had started wasn't a stunt. It was a spark. And by morning, the fuse would burn straight through every newsroom in the country. By 7 a.m., the West Wing was crawling with damage control, a hive of panicked activity. Legal aides rushed between rooms, phones glued to their ears, their voices hushed but urgent. Staffers, some too nervous to even change clothes, were pulling overnight shifts, their faces drawn. The press office whiteboard had been wiped clean, then filled again, then wiped clean once more, a testament to the fact that no one knew which strategy would hold for more than 10 minutes. President Trump hadn't spoken publicly since Crockett's hearing, but inside the walls of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he was anything but quiet. In the Roosevelt room, he paced, a threadbare red tie askew, his hair slightly unkempt, barking into a speakerphone. Find out who that woman is. The one Crockett's talking about. I want her full record. School. Work. Everything. An aide's voice, tinny from the other end of the line, replied, "Sir, we believe her name is Genevieve Larson. She changed her legal name in 2010. There's a sealed court filing, I don't care about the court." Trump snapped, his voice rising. "I care about the story. We find her. We discredit her." Hope Sinclair, his legal counsel, exchanged a look with Brian Halford across the room. Even they, the architects of countless spin cycles, were starting to wonder whether this situation could be contained. Because it wasn't just about one woman anymore. It was about the machine built to protect the illusion behind closed doors. The communications team was falling apart. A young speechwriter had broken down crying after getting screamed at by Sinclair for suggesting they admit a minor lapse in judgment. Another aide spilled coffee on her notes while printing a prepared statement that never got read. No one knew who was making final decisions anymore. Trump changed his mind every hour, and then came the leak. At 8 a.m., a clip surfaced on a private news Discord server, then landed on Reddit within minutes. It was audio, muffled but unmistakable, Hope Sinclair's voice. "If the affidavit leaks, we are exposed. We can't explain away a paternity avoidance." The DNA order wasn't ignored, it was dodged. The clip spread like wildfire. Cable anchors scrambled to vet it. It was raw, unverified, but voice analysts matched it to public footage within an hour. The timeline matched too. Sinclair was cornered in a hallway by a Fox reporter later that morning. She didn't deny the voice, she just kept walking, her face a rigid mask. Inside the Oval Office, Trump was spiraling. "She recorded me," he muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No, sir," Halford replied quietly. "She recorded herself, probably. On a call." "Same thing," he barked. Halford didn't answer. At 10 a.m., Trump met privately with First Lady Melania Trump via secure video call. She was still in Geneva, attending a youth wellness summit. Her face was composed, but distant. "You said it was handled," she said softly. "It was handled," he replied, his voice thin, "until that woman came back." Melania didn't flinch. "You should have told me the full story. Not pieces." Trump's voice dropped, almost pleading. "This doesn't have to change anything. Barron is still our son." She blinked, lips pressed tight. "No, Donald. He's my son." The call ended shortly after. Meanwhile, 2 floors below street level, inside the dusty basement archives of the Maricopa County Family Court building in Phoenix, Judge Rosanna Vitelli sat staring at an envelope she hadn't touched in over 5 years. It was labeled, "Confidential." Sealed by order. Case TB versus JDT. She still remembered the day it arrived, the rushed filing, the frantic clerk, the unusual call from a senior federal judge urging her to keep the matter quiet and sealed for national security concerns. At the time, it sounded absurd, but the pressure was real. The signature on the memo, then Attorney General Jerome Beck. She didn't ask questions, judges learned early on how to read between the lines. But it stayed with her, like a splinter. And now, Jasmine Crockett had made it public. Judge Vitelli slowly ran her thumb over the edge of the envelope. She was 67 now, weeks from retirement. She presided over thousands of cases, custody fights, name changes, protection orders, but this one haunted her because it never had an ending. Inside was the original paternity motion, signed by Genevieve Larson under her alias Talia Breyer. There were 5 attachments. One was a DNA request order, issued by the court and stamped for service to Donald J. Trump. The others were responses from Trump's legal team, all requesting extensions, all citing scheduling conflicts, and finally, a motion to dismiss based on extraordinary executive obligations. But what there wasn't was a DNA result. The test never happened. Judge Vitelli picked up the phone and dialed her former clerk, now a civil rights lawyer in Flagstaff. "You see what's happening on TV?" she asked. "Hard to miss," the voice replied. "Remember that case from 2019? The one I told you about over drinks once? You kept that sealed." Silence. "You thinking of unsealing?" Judge Vitelli took a breath. "I'm thinking about what I should have done back then, before the pressure got to me." Elsewhere in Phoenix, a different story was breaking. An anonymous source leaked an internal court memo to the Arizona Sentinel, one that revealed Trump's legal team filed a protective objection to prevent any DNA sample from being submitted. The memo was technical, but one paragraph stood out. Client explicitly refuses biological test. Counsel advises alternate resolution terms. Suggested private financial settlement, media gag clause, immediate sealing. It matched the story Crockett told, almost word for word, back in D.C., when the Sentinel article hit the wire. CNN interrupted a live panel discussion mid-sentence. Anderson Pike sat stunned as his producer whispered the update through his earpiece. "Repeat that," he asked on air. The voice came through again. The Arizona judge had a DNA request. Trump refused. The test never happened. The panelists fell silent. "That means," Pike said slowly, his voice laced with disbelief, "there's no biological confirmation. No denial either. Just avoidance." Within minutes, #NoDNA was trending. People didn't need to understand legal jargon, they understood avoidance. And it stung. At the White House, the walls trembled again. Hope Sinclair was gone. Brian Halford was locked in a room with the president, trying to explain how a 5-year-old memo from a small court in Arizona had now become national front-page material. Trump wasn't yelling anymore, he was quiet, too quiet. "How did they get that memo?" he asked, staring blankly at the floor. "They didn't," Halford answered. "Someone leaked it." "The clerk? A lawyer? Maybe the judge?" Trump grunted. "She promised to keep it sealed." Halford didn't remind him that promises meant little when truth was staring a judge down in her last weeks on the bench. Across the country, the mood was shifting. This wasn't some far-off scandal anymore, this was messy, human, and painfully real. People started asking, if he had nothing to hide, why not just take the test? In a hair salon in Tulsa, a woman getting her braids touched up muttered, "It's always the lies that get them, not the act." The lies. In Minneapolis, a college student tweeted, "I don't care who the father is. I care that the president used the court system like a personal broom closet." Even some conservative voices were starting to crack. A retired GOP strategist said on live radio, "I'm not saying it's true, but the way they are dancing around it. It doesn't look good." The silence is louder than the accusation. Meanwhile, Judge Vitelli made one last call to Jasmine Crockett's office. No voicemail, no assistant. She was transferred straight to the Congresswoman. "Congresswoman Crockett." The judge said, her voice firm, "This is Rosanna Vitelli. I have something you might want to see." But while Crockett readied for what came next, Americans from coast to coast were preparing to choose sides. Not just politically, but morally. By the time the Arizona court memo, detailing Trump's refusal of a DNA test, was read live on Good Morning America, the country wasn't watching the news anymore, it was living it. In a diner in Des Moines, Iowa, the usual morning chatter about weather and corn futures was replaced with sharp arguments over truth, loyalty, and what it meant to be lied to by the most powerful man in the nation. 2 booths apart, an elderly couple argued with a younger man in a Carhartt hoodie. "I don't care who fathered that boy," the older man muttered, stirring his coffee. "This smells like a smear job." The younger man leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "You really believe he didn't block the test? There's proof. Sealed files. NDAs. The whole mess." He ran from the truth, just like he runs from everything else. Down south in Mobile, Alabama, a church parking lot turned into a makeshift debate stage. Pastor Carl Denson had just finished morning prayer when his phone buzzed with a message from a deacon: "Turn on the TV." When he did, Crockett's face filled the screen again. This time, she was walking up the Capitol steps, flanked by 2 aides, holding a plain manila folder. By 10 a.m., the Washington Ledger reported that a federal request had been submitted to unseal additional documents referenced by Crockett's team. The language in the motion was surgical: "The matter now falls under national interest. Suppression of truth under pretense of executive privilege constitutes a breach of ethical governance." The response from voters came fast. Some districts saw impromptu protests, people with homemade signs demanding transparency outside state houses in Utah, Missouri, and Pennsylvania. But the pushback wasn't one-sided. In Birmingham, a pro-Trump rally formed outside a local news station after it aired the memo headline. A woman in a sequined flagged blouse shouted into a bullhorn, "This is what they do when they can't beat him at the polls. They attack the family." Across town, 30 minutes later, a college group held a silent march, holding signs that read "Truth over image" and "We deserve honest leaders." In coffee shops, classrooms, job sites, and buses, people picked sides. Meanwhile, in Gary, Indiana, a single mom named Patrice Kinley sat on the couch with her 15-year-old daughter, both watching the news like it was unfolding in their living room. "Why didn't he just take the test?" her daughter asked softly. Patrice shook her head. "Baby, when people lie long enough, even the truth starts feeling like a threat." In Philadelphia, college professor Hugo Bren held an open forum in his American ethics class. He wrote one question on the board: "Does personal truth matter in public service?" What followed was 3 hours of the most raw, honest conversation he'd seen in years. One student wept, another stormed out. Crockett, meanwhile, hadn't spoken since the call from Judge Vitelli. She was preparing. Not just legally, but emotionally. Because this wasn't just a political revelation, this was about how America sees its leaders and whether that vision was ever real to begin with. At a town hall in Bakersfield, California, Representative Lynette O'Connor faced her own firestorm. A conservative voter stood up and shouted, "You people are tearing this country apart with gossip." She didn't yell back. She just asked the question, "Is it gossip if it's documented in a court file?" He didn't answer. Even international media picked up the story. A British anchor called it the most consequential question of paternity since Jefferson. In Canada, late-night comedians walked a delicate line between satire and awe. And in Brazil, one anchor simply said, "In America, power fears truth more than defeat." But back in Washington, something else was shifting: polling numbers. A new survey showed Crockett's favorability had jumped 18 points among independents, especially those under 40. Trump's base remained strong, but undecided voters were drifting toward what they now called the honesty faction. And while Crockett didn't hold a press conference, her team confirmed one thing to the Columbus Herald: Judge Vitelli's envelope was now in their possession. On social media, the reaction was instant: "She's not done. She's just loading the next shot." In a Facebook group of political science majors, one comment stood out: "Crockett's not taking him down with noise. She's taking him down with documentation." But it wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about how America, as a country, responds when the truth is no longer whispered but read out loud, with receipts. And while the nation stayed glued to their screens, Crockett's final move was getting ready. One meant to close the chapter with clarity and leave no room for interpretation. It was just after 3 p.m. when Jasmine Crockett stepped out of a silver sedan and walked toward the press briefing podium outside the Capitol building. No TV crews had been tipped off. There were no barricades or media wristbands, just a few dozen reporters who had started waiting early based on a single rumor: she's going to speak. She didn't bring aids. No sunglasses. No lawyer beside her. Just the same manila folder everyone had seen her carry into the building that morning. When she stepped behind the MIC, the noise stopped. "My name is Jasmine Crockett," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "And I'm not here to repeat myself. I'm here to end the guessing." She pulled a single page from the folder and held it up. "This is the original 2019 DNA test order, filed under seal, issued by a state court. Never fulfilled. Never challenged in open court. Only buried." Cameras clicked, reporters strained forward. "What you've heard these past days is not theory. It's not drama. It's not political theater. It's a record. One that the American people should have seen years ago." Someone called out, "Congresswoman, are you releasing the full affidavit?" She paused, her gaze steady. "I'm handing it over to the House Ethics Committee, the DOJ, and the Public Record Office. I will not redact it. I will not hide behind legal games." Another reporter asked, "Are you concerned this will backfire politically?" She gave the faintest smile. "Truth doesn't backfire. It just burns where it needs to." The room went quiet again. That evening, the files were published in full by multiple outlets. No paywall. No spin. Just documents, the NDA, the DNA test request, the missed court appearances, the financial settlement history, and the internal memo confirming that the Trump legal team advised avoidance at all costs. It was undeniable now. He didn't just hide it, he buried it under influence and money. That night, CNN aired a primetime segment titled "The Truth Test: What Crockett's Files Reveal About Power and Protection." MSNBC followed with "The Price of Image: How Silence Served the Presidency." Even Fox News, pressured by internal leaks, hosted a reluctant debate over whether Trump's denials could be trusted any longer, and across the country, the impact ran deeper than clicks. In Lincoln, Nebraska, a middle school civics teacher rewrote his lesson plan after a student asked, "Can a president lie and still be a good leader?" In Las Vegas, a Republican councilwoman announced she was stepping down from a campaign committee, saying, "I can't ask others to support a man who ran from a test my husband would have taken without blinking." In Baltimore, Genevieve Larson finally spoke. She released a 2-page letter to the press. No cameras. No interviews. Just words. "I didn't ask for this spotlight, but I'm not ashamed anymore. I kept quiet because I thought silence would protect my son. But I've learned that silence only protects the wrong people. I thank Congresswoman Crockett for doing what I could not." Her son, now in college, issued his own short statement, "My mom told the truth. That's all that matters." And still, Jasmine didn't grandstand. She didn't launch a book deal. She didn't ride the wave. She returned to work. She introduced 2 new bills in the House within a week, one to limit executive interference in state-level court cases and another to create legal pathways for revisiting sealed settlements involving public officials. Neither passed immediately, but they were filed in ink in daylight. And for many Americans, that meant something. For Trump, the damage was permanent. His legal team scrambled to spin it, but donors pulled back. Independent voters walked away. Even some of his former inner circle, like Sinclair and Halford, began cooperating with oversight committees privately. One senior aide was heard saying, "It wasn't Crockett who did this to him. He did it to himself. She just told the story he tried to erase." And as for Crockett, she never said, "I told you so." She just kept showing up. Because that was the point all along. This wasn't about proving someone was a liar. It was about proving that even in the most protected halls of power, truth could still get through. If someone was brave enough to stand still while the world shook. As the camera faded from her final press appearance, her words stayed behind, "Your image is what you show. Your truth is what you live with. And I didn't come to Congress to guard images. I came to honor the truth." If this story meant something to you, if it made you think, reflect, or even reconsider, subscribe for more. The stories we tell shape the world we live in. Let's tell the right ones. Like, share, and comment to keep the conversation going.